Thank you, Aid, for that introduction. And we're really going to try and live up to the need to deliver some messages of hope, which is the fuel for driving change and inclusive growth. Morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think it's raining inside.
It's raining.
It's a blessing.
Can't see anybody.
I'm struck that the importance of hope in challenging times. The famous American author F. Scott Fitzgerald once said that the test of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two opposing truths in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And we know that there is a grim truth in the world in the state of the climate crisis and the state of geopolitics. But there is also a very positive truth, the truth of hope, that there are amazing leaders from all geographies and all sectors doing things, innovating, collaborating, and it's focusing on those which can give us cause for hope. So I'm really looking forward to exploring those stories of practical collaborative change, driving inclusive growth that we can all learn from. So we've got an amazing audience. We have a former president of Colombia, Indigenous Peoples leader, a director of the loan program in the States, and a philanthropic leader, Iván Duque, Hindu Ibrahim Jigasha, and Rohini Nilekani and Nilekani. But let me start with you, Iván. You've done a lot of work on tackling the issue of deforestation. So tell us a little bit about the sort of flavor of the work that you've done, and in particular, how you've made sure that's an inclusive process that's not just driven top down.
Well, thank you so much, Nigel. It's a great honor for me to be in this amazing panel with people that I admire and respect a lot. And let me begin by saying something. The world talks a lot about carbon neutrality, but we need to talk more about nature positive solutions. And the reason why this is so important is because without nature positive solutions, we're not going to accomplish the NDCs. And if it were a country, deforestation and negative use of land will be the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases globally. And when we think about the places of the world that are endangered, you have the Amazon basin, you have the Congo basin, you have some of the most important basins in Southeast Asia and many other places. But just think of the Amazon. The Amazon every year basically captures 10% of all the world greenhouse gases emissions. But we have lost in the last 4 decades the size of France and Germany together due to deforestation. And if the trend that we have of deforestation continues, in less than a decade, the Amazon is no longer going to be a contention wall, but it will become a net emitter. And we have to act now. So how do we act? And that takes me to 3 criteria. Market-driven, nature-based solutions. And you need to combine carrot and stick. So you need to tackle the environmental crimes. In most of the Amazonic countries, the environmental crimes don't have imprisonment sentence. So you need to say, we're going to be tough with those crimes, but you have to provide good incentives for those market-driven nature solutions, and those are connected with aggregated value chains. Simple. You need to guarantee that products like camu camu, acai, copo azul, sacha inchi from the Amazon have access to world markets because they are sustainable, they are scalable, and they provide a way of living with communities. So that's a solution that is needed. On the other hand, you need to use technology to tackle the main causes of deforestation. Illegal mining, illegal cattle, illegal wood, and illegal crops. And just on illegal mining, technology can help us identify where are those gigantic yellow machines located and tell that to the whole world so everybody is exposed how those machines got there, and use technology also to make those machines unoperable. And another solution that is very important, build natural conservation contracts with indigenous and local communities. Because we have to understand that we can do everything right in terms of carbon neutrality in the Western Hemisphere, but if we don't get the Amazon right, we won't meet the indicators that are our approach to 2030 and 2050. So I'll finish by saying that from our perspective, the concrete solutions start with one simple one. How do you expand your protected areas? And people tend to say, okay, 30 by 30, fine. But you know what? We were able to pass in Colombia from 13% protected areas to more than 30% in 2022, so we can do 20 before 30. 30 before 30, and that's a major achievement that most developing countries and the whole world needs to achieve. And second, create the market conditions so that biodiversity credits and nature credits can become a source of income for countries, communities, and indigenous groups. Those are specific elements that I will present.
Thank you. I mean, those extensions of protected areas are really impressive. And your last point reminds me of an event I was at last year looking at how do we roll out market solutions in Africa, and a community organizer stood up and said, what you need to remember right now is that there's a man in the forest with an axe trying to decide how to put put food on the table for the family. So if we don't change the incentives, the axe wins, right? So a great example. Thank you, Iván. And I might come back to you later to talk a bit more about the importance of markets. Let me turn now to Rohini and the role of philanthropy. We have a complete mix here of different sectors. And Rohini, you've been a huge advocate. I know you're also an author and a publisher, and we may come back to talk more about education. But tell us a little bit about some of the examples of how philanthropy can play a catalytic role in driving inclusive growth.
Yeah, no, I think philanthropy is very critical right now as risk capital, and to help especially social entrepreneurs to innovate so that then the markets and the state can pick up and scale once those opportunities, because social entrepreneurs are very, very close to people and communities at the first mile where the problems are. And so I think philanthropy really needs to step up. Today, globally, only about 2% of all philanthropy goes into climate and the environment. And I agree that we need to really step up looking at biodiversity and conservation, along with thinking of other things for mitigation. So I think the risk capital, the ability to be to have patient capital, just the ability to allow people to experiment over time. And then I think plays a very critical role right now. In my philanthropy in India, climate and environment is my largest portfolio. And we have wonderful civil society organizations doing everything from great new data and research gathering to actually working with tribal and forest communities to ensure that they get their rights. So there's a whole spectrum there. And right now we have started something called the India Climate Collaborative to help drive, along with the government in many cases, the agenda to move forward on our NDCs, to open up new opportunities for our energy transition, and also to work with our communities, because in India, as climate risks begin to show, and we all know they're already here, it's going to be our poor and vulnerable communities that are going to get hit the most. So one of the things, an organization I support, and I'll stop here because there are too many examples, is called Seeds. And what they do is they've helped communities. They've looked at the 150 most vulnerable climate spots in India, and they work with communities there to say, what is your loss potential? If something happens, what do you stand to lose? And they get that attested in advance, so that if, God forbid, an event happens, the government can respond in the right way to address the loss that those communities are going to incur. So there's a lot of such innovation happening in India, which we hope can be shared everywhere, and philanthropy must support it. I think there's too much wealth hanging around in the world, all dressed up with nowhere to go. It should come out.
And Rohini, I know we have very little time, but you just touched on the fact that some of the work is back with communities and technology, and some of the work is communities engaging with government. So it seems to me that nearly everywhere that we're innovating, there's an element of collaboration that we can't, if we don't bring communities with us. And I want to turn to Jigar Shah now, as the director of the Loan Program Office in the Department of Energy in the States, now overseeing one of the most ambitious allocations of capital to climate solutions in the world. So Jigar, tell us a little bit about some of the cutting edge solutions that you're applying in this, and in particular, how you're working with communities on the way.
Yeah, no, thanks for including me here. Look, I think that energy has been the key to human flourishing for a very long time, right? So I think this is something that we frankly measure around the world, right? Access to electricity, access to energy, and people find energy, right? Whether it's their own human energy or whether it's diesel power or whether it's whatever it is that they need to do, wood, et cetera. And so I think part of what we're trying to figure out how to do is to democratize that, that innovation scale, right? I mean, the Department of Energy has long been the best organization in the world at innovation and research, right, with the 14 national labs, et cetera. But what you find is that, you know, raw capitalism ends up only supporting companies that have already dominated in the energy space, right? Because they have a balance sheet, they have the ability to borrow money to do the next thing. And so our loan office has been essential to innovators and entrepreneurs to be able to, you know, get across that valley of death. We build the bridge to bankability. And so when you think about what we've accomplished in the past, where we did all the, you know, largest solar and wind projects in the United States, we provided essential debt capital. Today, those have crossed the bridge to bankability. Now you see many countries around the world deploying those technologies using more traditional commercial finance. That wouldn't have occurred had it not been for our intervention earlier. I think today what we're finding is that what America is quite good at, and many entrepreneurs, frankly, around the world are quite good at, is small is beautiful as opposed to bigger is better. And so we have transformed what we're doing at the Loan Programs Office to be able to fund, you know, thousands of $10,000 deployments instead of one large billion-dollar project, right? And so that was this Project Hestia deal that we were doing where 25% of all those deployments are in Puerto Rico. They're creating microgrids for every single home, and so that they're far more resilient. And, you know, the average income that is deploying these things are now at or below the average income of Puerto Rico, right? So, so it's actually quite an inclusive movement that's occurring. We separately did a microgrid at a tribal nation in California. And, you know, what they were looking for was that resiliency that they needed so that they weren't shut off from power during a wildfire event or something else, right? And, you know, I think one of the challenges that we have today internationally is that there continues to be this feeling amongst many of the development banks that it's not worth helping people unless we can build them a modern grid powered by nuclear power, like connected throughout the entire sort of part of, you know, Western Africa or Eastern Africa or whatever it is, right? And I mean, I think it's just a travesty that we think that way, right? When you think about all of the devices that we have innovated around where we can give people access to modern energy for $12, right? We can give people access to modern energy for, you know, $10,000 at a birthing clinic where, you know, right now they're giving, you know, like birth to cell phone light, right? Like these things are things that we can just solve next week. It's not a lot of money. They have it all in their Bezos Earth Fund that they've committed to USAID or to this or that. But I feel like we have this desire to do this thing that'll take 30 years that's fairly impossible to do given local conditions. When we have technologies today that we've invented over the last 10 years, they're ready to deploy at scale now, right? So for us as the government and the loan program, you know, we're responsive to what innovators and philanthropies and others want to do. You don't want us telling everybody, you know, this is how you shall do it. You really need that entrepreneurial energy and those ideas coming from the marketplace, and then for us to be backing them.
And it's really interesting. It seems to me that, you know, there's a sort of truism that what gets measured gets managed, and then often and I think that often leads to what's easy to measure gets managed, and that's not necessarily what we want. So that, for example, can often mean that we measure deployment of capital rather than numbers of human lives made resilient. I mean, that's a very active conversation here in DC right now. I think the multilateral banks have tended to obsess with deployment at the expense of impact, which is harder, right? Because you have to break things up and be more nuanced. So really interesting to hear that you don't have just one overarching program. You've got these broken down so that you're addressing the different needs of different sectors of community, not just the big 30-year nuclear mega projects. Thank you. And that's a really good link to Hindu. Hindu, first of all, congratulations. I know you've just been elected as the chair of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples Issues. And I know you're still an ambassador for the UN Climate Champions, which we did a lot of work together, so that's great. The call for genuine involvement and inclusion in decision-making programs of communities, and particularly indigenous peoples, has been around for a long time. Tell us a little bit about where you see progress being made, where indigenous peoples are being involved in decision-making progress, and how that's improving the quality of the solutions as well as the quality of lives.
Thank you, Nigel. Good morning. It's really a great pleasure to be with all of you here. So, indigenous peoples are already leading by example. We do not wait for anyone. We're already protecting 80% of the world's biodiversity. And we do that just as duty. We are not doing that as job or as someone asking us, because we know the importance of nature, the interconnectivity between all the ecosystems. And that's where we need the collaboration, where we need to sit all together. So where I'm seeing that, having this panel is already like a good example. But are we implementing what we are saying? So this is where we are missing. So we need to rebuild this trust. The community like mine, when we talk at the COP28, we have to go away from the fossil fuel, we have to invest on nature, we have to protect nature. And when I go back home, we're experiencing more than 132 Fahrenheit. So it's like unbelievable how you can live on that. And it's not because we are nomadic, we cannot get access to the AC to live, because it is about our life. It is about our food, our access to the water. It is about the survival of all the peoples. So we need to rebuild the trust. What we are saying have to respect what we are doing on the ground. And now we are talking about the just transitions. I really love what you all said here. But just transitions, that's the way that is going. We need a critical minerals to pass from one side to another one. All the critical minerals are in the high spot biodiversity, who are the home of indigenous peoples. Do we have a measure how much we have to extract again? For our electric vehicle, of course. But how about the people who do not have water to drink? Are we thinking about sharing that back? So that's where indigenous peoples wanted to be in the tables, to say, listen, you want to have a just transitions? We are there to guide you. We cannot continuously doing what's happened in the past. When we discover oil, we say we have the right solutions, and then we have to go far from the coal. And at the end of the day, climate change, biodiversity loss, and everything. So now, if we want to have a just transition, it has to be just, equitable, sharing with all the countries. Developing nations, Latin America, Africa, Asia, have all those minerals. Developed nations wanted to have this mineral. Okay, let's sit down together. Let's discuss together. And indigenous peoples must be in the tables because it is our home. We are talking about our mineral. We are talking about our biodiversity. So we need to set this discussion, either we like it or not, but in which condition and how are we going to do that? So indigenous peoples have this solution for you. You come sit with us and we can tell you.
So we've only got about 5 minutes left. Let's have a quick whiz round, just a quick follow-up question for each of you, and just a sort of 1 minute answer. Iván, you talked about the importance of markets. I know you're on the board of the ACME, the African Carbon Markets Initiative. Say a little bit about the importance for communities and countries, in emerging communities and countries, of those voluntary carbon markets and the role of ACME and organizations like that.
I'm going to connect the dots of many things that have been said here that are very interesting. The fact is that the world is highly indebted. So when you look at debt to GDP ratios on average in the world, they're above 90%, which means that there's very limited fiscal space for countries to finance all the climate action. And then you ask how much is needed for regions to achieve what they want to achieve. Just Africa needs to invest almost $2.8 trillion in the next 7 years just to achieve the NDCs. So is that money going to come from donors, bilaterals? I don't think so. Is that money going to come from government budgets? I don't think so. So where's that money going to come from? And that's the role that the market plays, because you do have people that are saying, we want companies and even countries saying we want to buy the credits. So you need to have the projects that allow through credits to massively mobilize capital and accelerate energy transition, clean cooking, protection of ecosystems, recovery, and so on. And we have taken lessons. So we have to improve integrity, we have to include good accounting, but we also need to ensure that communities are empowered to achieve what they want to achieve. And I think that's what the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative intends to do. Take the lessons, improve the standards, improve the integrity, improve the accounting, but make possible a massive mobilization of ESG investment that can help the countries achieve their NDCs. So that's why I support the initiative. I've been participating with our own lessons. And as I have said it, and I know it can be controversial, I said, if voluntary carbon markets did not exist, we will have to invent it. Because it has been an effective mechanism to mobilize capital, while in many other conversations, there are a lot of pledges, but not few disbursements.
Yeah, and I think this is a good example, a sort of macro example of Hindu, what you talked about in terms of having the right voices around the table. If all of the standards and conversations are only done in the sort of elite halls in London and Washington, D.C., and not involving and including the genuine voices of those communities who stand for benefit, then they'll be skewed a particular way. Thank you. Rohini, I mentioned earlier you're as well as all your philanthropy, you're an author and a publisher. We know that there's a whole generation that is growing up increasingly well-educated in the very very troubling, frightening science of climate change. Say a little bit about the importance of education in terms of giving more agency to young people of all the different ways that they can be involved in forging the positive solutions.
Yeah, I think it's both an aging world and a very young world. India is a very young country, and our young people have to carry the hope, because without hope you cannot act. So I think one of the things education has to do is to reduce the nature deficit that especially urban children have, because when you're connected with nature, you begin to get back from nature the hope you need to act. So throughout our education work, of course, we do try to ensure this interdisciplinary approach. But I think you're right that young people need to find hope, and hope in order to act, not hope as idle sort of optimism, but hope so that hope is the new religion, and that's a religion that doesn't divide. It unites us all. But think, today there are 8 billion people, all of whom have realized that we are in this together, and we're in it, we float together or we sink together. And imagine when 8 billion people have a common project, what would humanity do? And I want us to remember that, and not that doomsday is around the corner, because human beings always innovate.
Thank you. And it does seem to me that absolutely sometimes we don't seem to have much faith in ourselves,
yes,
or self-confidence. So, Jiga, just briefly.
But also in our empathy and in our ability to turn empathy to compassion. I'm all for markets, all for the state, all for everything, but we are all human beings first. And if we can activate our empathy, just like Sir Elton John said, I think miracles can happen.
So we need empathy and engineering.
Empathy and technology. I'm all for technology.
Just very briefly, because I know Raheen's got very keen on some exponential initiatives. Yes. One of the things, just say a little bit about how the IRA and the work you're doing is not just deploying technology in the States, but driving costs down, which will then be make technology more available all over the world.
Well, if you don't mind, maybe I'll answer a slightly different question that Hindu brought up. I think, when the president passed the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, one of the things that we were mandated to do were these community benefits plans, right? And so one of the loans, we've done about $20 billion loans in critical minerals and batteries. And one of the loans we did was with Syra Resources, which get graphite from Mozambique into Louisiana for final processing. I think when you look at the level of engagement that we did with indigenous peoples there, made sure that folks who live in Mozambique are the ones getting the jobs there, making sure they're being paid a fair wage, making sure that women have the right to work there as well. We're all under a nonprofit that is continuously improving the process out of London. I don't think this is perfect, But I do think that ensuring that that hard work is being done has also allowed the US to compete favorably against any of the other countries around the world who want those critical minerals, because I think countries see that we're doing things in a far more serious way than many other countries are doing.
Really interesting that I think that higher standards in terms of environmental and social integrity and Indigenous peoples' engagement could actually end up being a market advantage. Hinder, I know we're at time, but just a final thought from you on how to build and maintain trust between, I remember in Dubai, for me, one of the highlights was the call to action on food, which had leaders of Indigenous peoples, smallholder farmers groups, and major food companies all supporting one call to action. It felt like there was a really palpable shift in trust there. How do we build that and maintain it? Just briefly.
We can build this trust in both sides. We trusted peoples, but they are not trusting us. Direct access finance without intermediaries. All the peoples who wanted to invest on Indigenous peoples, because it is an investment. When you give a direct access finance for an Indigenous person, it is not only the bilateral benefit, it is everyone that benefits. So there is no way that you just, we trust you, we protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. You should trust us to give us your billion that you have flowing up that we do not see on the ground to the communities. Then of course we can manage that. Maybe we are not a bankers who can do all the Excel that you are expecting, but we are a good people who can protect the nature, who know how to plant the trees, who know how to harvest, who know how to protect you. So we trust you, you trust us. Give us the direct access finance and we can do the job.
Great. So, thank you all for lots of wonderful examples of if you like, I think the sort of alchemy of combining technical expertise of all various sorts and human empathy to come together to drive inclusive innovation, to drive inclusive growth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the whole panel.